Wobbledogs, a funny game that I will explain to you as I rush through the tutorial. This is a Wobbledog, and that is a food dispenser, which I used to make a plethora of french fries for Mingle to eat. Mingle was an auto-generated name, by the way. I knew going into this that I wouldn't have the brain power to name 100 dogs all different things, so I didn't. I did name a few of them, but not many. Enough about that, though. This is the Gut Flora Field Guide, of which I only have 2 unlocked. The pink one is the default gut flora all base dogs will spawn with, and feeding dogs different things like this burrito and this nutritional pellet will unlock more gut floras, which is what you can see swimming around in the pink circle on the left of the screen. And whatever flora a dog has swimming around in their gut will determine what kind of mutations will occur after they pupate, just like real life dogs. This is an incubator filled with all the default dogs you could ever want. And I know I said I wasn't gonna name them, but I named this guy first so that I wouldn't forget which dog I hatched first. With that, I had hatched my first dog and finished the tutorial, earning myself an achievement, Randy. We love Randy in this house, even though he's not going on my egg counter because I didn't hatch him. I also peeked at the Gut Flora guide, mainly to get the exclamation point to go away. And for the sake of time, I'm probably not going to mention what every food item does as this video goes on. But just so you know, when a dog eats a food item and experiences a mutation from it, the blank space in the Gut Flora guide will fill itself in, letting you know the effects of certain foods, one of my favorites being french fries, which makes dogs very long and very thin. I didn't waste time before popping down more incubators to hatch my next 4 dogs, Noodle, Yonder, Sippy, and Exception. First hacked up some half-eaten food, which I fed to Noodle to learn a new gut flora. Both Mingle and Randy birthed a capsule, which I got decorative items from. Capsules also become relevant later on. There are 2 ways to get them. Either an adult dog can produce them, don't ask me how, or a dog can dig one up. First was ready to pupate at this point, but I held off because I wanted them all to pupate together. And in the meantime, while I waited for them all to be ready to pupate, Randy produced an egg, and we were back to another tutorial, which gave a quick rundown of how the simulation works. So after choosing 2 dogs, in this case Randy and Mingle, you get taken into the simulation where you can either pick a final dog or choose 2 dogs to crossbreed. And after a few generations, you have the potential to start getting some cool new stuff, like this new ear type. This dog is also a completely different color from what Randy and Mingle were. She's also quite the party animal. And after you select your final dog, you're taken to meet what I can only assume is Doggy Jesus, who does whatever this is. And after that traumatic event, you can find the egg of the dog you selected in the incubator. While that dude was incubating, the rest of the puppies were ready to finally pupate, and so I sent them all up. And after petting all the cocoons to completion, I hatched first. And there really wasn't much of a change other than him getting bigger. Noodle was second and actually did something interesting. Exception got a slight color variation, whereas both Yonder and Sippy pretty much stayed the same. I hatched the 6th dog and named her Nifty. And not too long after hatching, Nifty was ready for her first pupation, where she reverted back to normal colorization. After a short while, the first 5 were ready for the second round of their 4 pupations. First became pale, and Noodle became very pale. Exception became an almost purple color, and Sippy did nothing interesting. And Yonder had an almost orange hue to him. I unlocked both the space food dispenser and the jungle food dispenser before Nifty was ready to mutate again. And she got bigger, but she also reverted even more so back to default colorization. Jumping right into the first 5's 3rd mutation, Sippy got bigger. Yonder grew a very funny snout shape. Exception's nose grew like 10 sizes bigger. Noodle became taller and wider, and first stayed a very default-looking dog. While waiting for Nifty to mutate, Randy passed away and split into bite-sized pieces that the rest of the dogs enjoyed very much. And I was kinda hoping that eating another dog's body would do something cool for Nifty's 3rd mutation, but it really didn't. Mingle passed away next, and after a filling meal of Wobbledog parts, the first 5 were ready for their last pupations. Sippy's last mutation was overall unremarkable. Yonder turned purple, which was cool. Exception just got bigger all around. I'm not sure if Noodle's head shrunk or if his body just got bigger, and first became much more pastel in color. And now that the first 5 were fully grown, I could use them in the simulation to try and get even cooler dogs. Starting with Noodle and Exception, which ended in a tiny litter and this cool dude. Also, from here on out, I skipped the Doggy Jesus part because it's cursed and I don't like watching it. I paired first and Noodle next, and ended with this absolute goober. Nifty was ready for her last mutation, where she lost at least 90% of her brain. I paired Nifty and Sippy next, and chose to pick this individual with an almost non-existent head, after which I popped the 7th, 8th, and 9th dog into the incubator to cook, naming them Peanut, Crouton, and Pancake, after which I placed down 2 more rooms and connected them with tubes, one of which I divided into 5 sections to act as somewhat of an experimentation room, where I could make sure that dogs were only eating what I chose for them. Those being french fries, moon cheese, alien fruit, banana, and coconut. I put away a few of the dogs before noticing these dud eggs, which I don't recall ever seeing in the game before, so I sent them into the experimentation room, before bringing the dogs back out that I had thrown into storage, because I wasn't actually sure if they had given me all the eggs yet, and I was gonna need them. In the meantime, I sent the 3 I had just hatched up for their first mutation, during which I received another dud egg, which I assumed was the last egg I was gonna get, so I stored all the adult dogs again before hatching the puppies. Pancake was very color, Crouton became orange, and Peanut became kind of a yellow color. With those 3 done, I went back to the experimentation room to evenly disperse the dud eggs, before setting the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th dog to incubate, naming them Kiwi, Twofold, Duster, Bear, and Altitude. I also sent all the cocoons I could find into the experimentation room, because one of the effects of cocoons is to give dogs the plus version of whatever gut flora they have floating around, which does something, I think. After a bit, the experimentation dogs were ready to go up into their first cocoons, during which I earned a new food item, the chicken nugget, which was very cool. What was less cool was Kiwi's lackluster mutation. Twofold was also just as unimpressive. Duster did something fun by turning a little purple. And finally, both Bear and Altitude were also disappointing. Overall, an underwhelming performance from the experimentation dogs. Except for Duster, he's cool. Pancake was turning into a rather big dog. Crouton became purple, and Peanut stayed a very small dog. I decided to make a fenced-off section to put Pancake into, because I wanted the achievement for having a big dog. And to achieve that, my plan was to feed Pancake exclusively onion rings, which should give the desired result. But after feeding a few onion rings and not getting the right gut flora, I decided that being forced to eat anything with onion was a cruel and unusual punishment, and Pancake didn't deserve that, so I let him free. And since nothing interesting happened between the next 2 rounds of mutations, I'm gonna speed through those really quick. For the first round, Kiwi had shockingly little happen in way of mutations, which was disappointing. Twofold became very purple, Duster became longer and more purple, Bear didn't really do anything, Altitude stayed rather short and small, whereas Pancake became even bigger and brighter, Crouton's snout turned upwards, and finally Peanut stayed pretty much the same. For the second round of mutations, Kiwi got longer, Twofold's nose turned red, Duster got darker in color, Bear stayed normal, Altitude got a green nose, Pancake was still a huge dog, Crouton became a square dog, and Peanut was still just a tiny fella. Now that Pancake, Crouton, and Peanut were all adults, I decided to go into the simulation to see what kind of beast I could create. I paired Pancake and Peanut together first, getting a dog with a tail that was also missing a front leg. And after collecting some more eggs, I got the suburban food dispenser, and the experimentation dogs were ready for their last pupation. Kiwi was still a very plain but long dog. Twofold was also still rather plain. Duster's face grew bigger, and he kind of reminded me of a dachshund with his short, stubby legs. Bear was the opposite of Duster, with long, spindly legs. And Altitude was a very unpleasant shade of pink. Overall, kind of underwhelmed with how the experimentation room went. And it's overall funner to just let the dogs wander around eating whatever they want, so I probably won't be using it again. I was ready to make the next round of dogs, though, so I went back into the simulation and paired Pancake and Duster together, which ended with these really cool triangle eyes and a fluffy tail. Noodle and Pancake were next, which had the end result of this funny-looking guy who honestly wasn't my favorite. Crouton and Noodle had the end result of this very pink dog. Duster and First made this dog with almost no nose. Exception and Yonder made this tiny dude. Twofold and Kiwi's pairing ended with an extra set of back legs, which was very cool. Bear and Kiwi paired together created this dog with a very downturned snout, which was very cute. Nifty and Peanut made this tiny-headed, thick-legged dog. And finally, Altitude and Crouton ended with this rambunctious, thin-legged, puffy-tailed individual. Now that I was ready for the next generation of dogs, I put the current one away and went about cleaning and revamping the rooms. The first room I made is what I call the mud room, which had pancakes and garlic bread as the food options. The second room was what I call the rainbow room, which had onion rings, gross, and ham sliders. I left the starter room as the default colors and put banana with a side of cut fruit in here. The fourth and final room is what I call the snow room, which had chicken nuggets and moon cheese in it. And with all the rooms decorated, I set the eggs to incubate, hatching mint, pillow, lump, goose, bird, baseboard, olive, damper, tiny, and mud, taking our total to 24 dogs hatched. The first round of mutations went pretty great, starting with Mint, who turned this really cool color of green. Pillow's head was massive compared to the rest of her body. Lump was overall a bigger dog. Goose, my favorite, got an even better downturned nose. Bird got ever so slightly bigger. Baseboard became a much darker orange and was overall very thin and long. Olive became a brighter, shinier dog. Damper now had purple ears. Tiny turned pink. And Mud was paler in color with more of a downturned snout. I felt like I was finally getting somewhere with the mutations, and it only took 5 hours. And if you're wondering how I played for 5 hours and somehow only hatched 24 dogs, I'm not the person to ask. I don't know how I managed that. But for the sake of time, let's speed through the rest of this group's mutations. Starting off the second round of mutations, Mint's head somehow got smaller. Pillow's ears shrunk and became more proportional to her body. Lump grew some real girthy legs. Goose, my favorite, was even better than before.
It got even better.
Bird was overall bigger. Baseboard still had an almost non-existent head. Olive was bigger and brighter. Damper turned from purple to pink. Tiny had something crazy going on with his legs. And Mud had turned to this pleasant brown color. The third round of mutations started with Mud, who had gotten bigger and turned pink. Tiny was now a darker color and his nose had a downward tilt to it. Damper stayed very much the same, except for getting just a little bigger. Olive was staying very consistent and once again got bigger and brighter. Bird had a dramatic change to snout shape. Goose was still serving absolute cunt, being the best dog ever. Baseboard was now a much darker blue. Lump got bigger, which earned me the big achievement. Pillow had a cool color change. And Mint got bigger, excluding the nose, that was still non-existent. For the fourth and final round of mutations, Mud changed to a much more pleasant shade of pink. Tiny had a darker color palette and wasn't so tiny anymore. Damper pretty much just got bigger. Olive got a shorter body and a huge head. Bird got bigger. Goose, my favorite, stayed pretty much the same. Baseboard, my second favorite, got ever so slightly bigger. Lump, with maybe the most impressive change of all, grew a second pair of front legs. Pillow was just a very big dog, and Mint had this neat shade of blue going on. And now that all of them were adults, I was just waiting for them to give me eggs so I could make the next generation. After which I went into the simulation, starting with Olive and Pillow, who made this absolute cutie. Mud and Pillow were next because I thought they would combine to make a really cute puppy, but they ended up making this puke dog. I paired Olive and Baseboard next, hoping to avoid another puke-like color palette, and was extremely happy to end up with this bright red double-tailed dog. Lump and Damper combined to make this worm, which I was very pleased with.
All I got was this worm. Ew, why is he shaking? Ew.
So I paired them together again, in the hopes that I could get a dog with just the most legs. But instead I got this, which I called Nasty in my notes, so yeah. Pillow and Olive were next, and they gave me this very fun, tiny-legged dog. Bird and Mint ended with this immaculate green color. Tiny and Baseboard made this dog with no front legs, which was really good. Lump and Mud ended with this very purple dog. And finally, Olive and Tiny created a jerboa. And if you don't know what a jerboa is, look it up. They're very tiny, little cute dudes. With the next generation ready, I deleted the current one and started the incubators, introducing Meatball, Pretty, Portable, Worm, Donut, Wallet, Trouble, Miss Biscuit, Green, and Wolf into the world, and increasing my egg total to 34. The first round of mutations started with Meatball, who didn't really do anything. Pretty somehow got even grosser looking. Portable got a brighter nose and ear color. Worm lost some of her pink color. Donut kept their impossibly short legs. Wallet turned yellow, which I think is better than the white because it reminds me of like an old-timey couch. Trouble got a lot bigger. Miss Biscuit lost some of her purple. Green became greener. Wolf didn't really change much. Round 2 of mutations. Wolf still didn't change much. Green ditched his namesake and turned yellow, like a little traitor. Miss Biscuit didn't really do anything. Trouble also didn't really do anything. Wallet turned almost completely yellow. Donut still had short legs. Worm was still a worm, just bigger. Portable turned green. Pretty got even uglier, and Meatball got ever so slightly bigger. In between the second and third round of mutations, I set up a room where I sent all the cocoons, half-eaten food, and dog poop I could find in preparation for something I wanted to try. However, we're not going to get into that something until I'm done with this group, so let's get into the third and fourth round of mutations. To start the third round of mutations, Wolf lost that cool yellow color and became almost entirely one color. Green became completely orange. Miss Biscuit stayed relatively the same. Trouble also became an entirely orange dog, while it became an entirely yellow dog. Donut's legs grew and looked more proportional to the rest of her body. Worm became less worm-like by losing some pink coloration. Portable became a brighter green. Pretty still wasn't pretty, but the color change looked better at the very least. And finally, Meatball turned a lighter blue and had a very twitchy leg for whatever reason. The fourth round of mutations were rather lackluster. Wolf, Green, and Miss Biscuits stayed mostly the same, if not growing just a little bit. Trouble got a touch longer. Wallet turned a very bright yellow color. Donut had a slight color change. Worm was a slightly bigger worm. Both Portable and Pretty didn't really do anything. And to end off this generation, Meatball became very flat. I didn't wait for them to lay eggs before sending them into storage, after which I set up a room that we're going to call the Old Dog Room, because that's what I wrote in my notes. I pulled Proto, Kiwi, Twofold, Crouton, Yonder, Nifty, Altitude, Exception, Noodle, and Mint out of storage. And because this was the senior citizen room, I made the floor ice for safety reasons. And after a short minute, and I do literally mean a minute, Proto passed away, and I sent all of him into the next room over. I won't walk you through what order they all went in, but I waited over half an hour for the last one to pass, making sure to collect their cores as I went. I also had no intentions of waiting around for dogs to die again, so I connected the ice room, which is what I'm renaming the Old Dog Room. After which I went into the cocoon dog body vomit room and set up incubators and started warming up the next generation, which are all going to be default dogs because I wanted to diversify my dog selection a little bit. I felt like I was getting all very similar looking dogs. And while I was waiting for them to cook, I made a little doggy graveyard in the ice room before hatching Gremlin, Bagel, Buddy, Frantic, Drip, and Liminal, rounding my egg total to an even 40. And since I didn't put any food dispensers in this room, they could only pick from the plethora of good food options I offered them. My plan being that they would get cool gut flora from eating the dog bodies, maybe having a nibble on one of the cocoons to get the plus variant of whatever bodies gave them. However, my fun was spoiled. I logged off after hatching the new dogs, and when I logged back on, all the body parts had disappeared. So I had to switch gears because I didn't think eating just cocoons would do anything all that interesting. And lucky enough, when I set up those graves, I had earned an achievement unlocking the spooky food dispenser, which wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to see cannibalism take place and to see what cool mutations would happen from it, but I also didn't want to wait another 30 minutes for another batch of dogs to die. So I guess the spooky food dispenser will be satisfactory enough. At the very least, there was a plethora of different food options to choose from. And by choose, I mean I threw a little bit of everything around for the dogs to eat. This group of dogs were also rather vicious, which I quite liked. I also like that Mingle came from beyond the grave to say hello. What I really didn't like was how bland the first round of mutations were. Liminal, nothing. Drip, nada. Frantic, more like frantically disappointing. Buddy, I think not. Bagel, an absolute joke. Gremlin, however, actually did something kind of fun. It wasn't a lot, but it was better than nothing. While I was busy being less than impressed, Mingle made some ectoplasm for me, which unlocked the mochi ball food, which will be really cool as soon as I unlock the dessert food dispenser. The second round of mutations went better than the first. Liminal got notably longer. Drip became really short with a huge nose. Frantic didn't really change much. Buddy became more pastel. Bagel stayed practically the same. And lastly, Gremlin turned this really cool color. The third round of mutations started with Liminal obtaining one of the best snoots so far. Drip went from short to long. Frantic kinda had a color change, but still nothing really notable. Buddy turned this great green color. Bagel became a little shorter. And Gremlin didn't really have much of a change, but he's still my favorite dog of this bunch. And after the third round of mutations with nothing really much happening, I decided to give them freedom and connect them to the rest of the room so they could explore. The fourth and final round of mutations started off very good, with Liminal having turned purple, followed by Drip, once again, not really doing anything. Frantic turned orange, which was neat. Buddy did nothing, Bagel did nothing, and finally Gremlin did almost nothing. I had only done this batch to try and diversify the color selection I had, and I guess that kinda worked. But ultimately, the best place to get new-looking dogs is in the simulation. Starting with Portable and Donut, where I selected this one-winged dog with 2 tails and 1 leg. Bird and Liminal made this square-eyed mouse-looking fella. Green and Wallet made this amazing zombie-looking creature. Miss Biscuit paired with Worm made this dog with comedically thin front legs. Mixing Wolf and Trouble made this brilliantly goofy individual. Goose and Gremlin, my favorites, made this perfect dog. And Portable paired with Trouble made this funny beast. With all the eggs made, I sent them to incubate, and because I wanted to keep my egg count to an even 10, I decided to incubate 4 default dogs. And as they hatch, I named them Bug, Mouse, Dog, and I originally named this one Zombie, spelled normally, but then I realized the opportunity I missed, and so I put him into storage to rename him Zombie, spelled like zombie plus B, because he had bee-like wings. Listen, you don't have to be amused, but I was. The rest of the dogs were named Quality, Previous, Spud, Bradley, Legs, and Yonder. And I might have lost count a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that's 50 eggs hatched. However, looking at my notes, I'm either only at 40 eggs, or I might have hatched more than 100. Or maybe I didn't miscount, I am at 50, and I just suck at taking notes. I could go back through the footage to check and recount my eggs, but I think it'll be funner to figure that out as I edit the video. I went through each room to change up what food was available, during which I also added another room, which I'm calling the Sandy Space Room, after which it was time for the first round of mutations. Starting with Bug, who had a really cool color change. Mouse had a really funny face. Dog was a slightly bigger dog. Zombie became a lovely olive green color. Quality became a much darker sandy color. Previous and Spud were boring and didn't really do anything fun. Bradley turned a darker green. Legs was still very leggy, but also green now. And Yonder had a smaller tail and was almost more yellow than green. The second round of mutations started with Bug turning yellow. I personally liked the green and pink combo, but this is fine too. Mouse became a brighter purple. Dog became very stretched. Zombie was now my 3rd favorite dog, simply the best. Both Quality and Previous became slightly bigger dogs. Spud had longer front legs. Bradley became a much bigger dog. I also just really like Bradley. I've decided that Bradley's my 5th favorite dog. Leg's head shrunk several sizes, and Yonder became bigger and yellower. The 3rd round had Bug growing bigger. Mouse had a slight color change. Dog's snout became more downturned. Zombie didn't really change much. Quality shrunk by a large amount. Previous and Spud were once again boring and didn't really do anything. Bradley's snout turned way up. Legs was no longer a pink dog, and Yonder kinda just grew a little in size. Quality also almost entirely blends in with the sand room, and that doesn't really mean anything, I just thought it was funny. Jumping into the last round of mutations, starting with Yonder, who once again just became a slightly bigger dog. Legs went crazy for the last mutation and doubled in size. Both Bradley and Spud were boring. Previous made up for it by doing whatever this was. I'm not sure if I like it, but it was a big change for sure. Quality ditched his sand camouflage and turned a more pleasant yellow. Zombie got a touch bigger. Dog's head got more than a touch smaller. Mouse ditched to the pink color. And finally, Bug disappointed me by losing the cool pink color and becoming purple. I decided to keep this batch out long enough to collect their eggs, during which I felt like I was losing my mind, but that's okay, so was Bradley. And be that as it may, I had collected 10 more eggs and it was time for another generation of mutts. I paired Zombie with Legs first to get this long-legged, double-winged dog. Bug and Zombie made this funny little dog. Bradley and Bug made this tiny worm dog with no legs. I paired Mouse and Legs next, obtaining this funky little guy. Legs and Baseboard made this tiny long-legged dog. Yonder paired with Olive was just a different colored version of Yonder. Pillow and Wolf made this cool 2-headed dog. Dog and Bear made this very long dog. Bug and Mouse made this scared-looking square. And finally, Bradley and Gremlin made this very tiny dog, which is now my 6th favorite dog. Also, after hatching this first one, I got the achievement for hatching 50 eggs. I named this one Lunge, and the rest were named Loot, Extra, Bread, Snacks, Peanut, Expected, Puppy, Loaf, and Bat, which takes my egg total to 60, or at least it should be 60, I think. And because I had unlocked some new foods, I took the time to switch up most of the food dispensers. The first round of pupation started with Lunge, who did almost nothing but increase in size. Loot also only increased in size, and Extra just got bigger. Granted, Extra is simply a worm, there's not much he could do. Bread got a slight color change. Snacks also got a little bit bigger. Peanut's nose kinda did a thing. Expected did nothing. Puppy also didn't really do anything, but as my 6th favorite dog, she gets a pass. Loaf became a longer and more purple Loaf. Bat had a slight color change and somehow looked even more nervous now. After the first round of mutations, I brought Extra to the ice room, and I thought that he would somehow be able to get around easier on the ice, but I was clearly wrong. So I brought him to the sand room instead, after which it was time for the second round of mutations. Lunge still looked almost the same. Loot was apparently a very wide dog, and earned me the dessert food dispenser. Extra turned almost entirely yellow. Bread got kinda bigger. I also put Egg down in my notes to describe him. Not entirely sure what that's about. Snacks turned a more pleasant orange color. Peanut got quite a lot bigger. Expected followed suit and also got quite a lot bigger. Loaf finished turning completely purple. Bat became very tall, which was very amusing. And Puppy didn't really do much of anything, which is perfect. The third round of mutations started with Lunge going in reverse, and instead of getting bigger, he got smaller this time. Loot got marginally bigger. Extra and Bread also got bigger and became slightly brighter in color. Snacks got kinda longer and brighter. Peanut was a much bigger dog. Expected did the unexpected and had a very cool color change. Loaf became a longer Loaf. Bat became a square, and Puppy was still perfect. I started the last round of mutations with Puppy, who grew quite a lot bigger. Bat went from entirely teal to entirely green. Loaf was just a very long dog. Expected didn't really do anything. Peanut became bigger and yellower. Snacks became a brighter dog. Bread was also a very long dog. Extra was also long. Loot turned pink, which I thought was fun, and Lunge had the opposite of a facelift. And back into the simulation we go to create the next round of dogs. Starting with Expected and Puppy, who made this two-headed dog with bat wings. I paired Lump and Peanut together, hoping to combine all their legs into one dog, which actually kinda worked, and I ended up with a dog who had the best ears I've ever seen and 3 sets of hind legs. Portable and Expected made this double-headed dog with a tail. I paired Zombie and Expected next. I know, a lot of expected pairings. In my defense though, 2 heads were really cool, but what's even better is 3 heads, which is exactly what Zombie and Expected made. Loaf and Lunge predictably made a long purple dog with wings. I decided to stop at 5 eggs for this round, but before I hatched anything, I went about deleting all the tubes I had in place, because I was annoyed that I was perpetually lost, and I thought that simplifying the paths would help. It didn't. I made a new room which we will call the graveyard room, because it was the room which I put the gravestones in, after which I started incubating the eggs. And as they hatch, I named them Blinky, Speedy, Yonder, and Rat, who tried to eat Yonder fresh out of the egg. The other 6 were named Pillow, Portable, Quality, Stubbs, Trouble, and Misha, taking the total egg count to a confident 70. It's a confident 70 now because I went back through and double-checked that I had counted right, and I'm 99% sure I did. Just before sending all the dogs up for their first mutation, I unlocked this achievement, which gave me trees. Not really anything of note, I just thought it was cool to have trees, to be honest. We can get into the first round of mutations now. Starting with Misha, whose body got much taller. Trouble's head got smaller, and his ears and nose turned green. Stubbs turned this really pleasant shade of purple. Quality's nose started tilting downwards. Portable was almost monochromatic. Pillow's colors became very muted and muddy looking. Rat became a slightly bigger rat. Yonder went through quite a lot of changes, but most notably to me, Yonder got flattened while in the cocoon. Speedy became this very cool new color. And finally, Blinky didn't change much at all except to get slightly bigger. Both Pillow and Blinky did this funny thing where they got stuck on the ice. Blinky eventually got their footing, but I had to flip Pillow back over like a turtle. The second round of mutations started with Misha turning purple, which wasn't necessary because I feel like I have plenty of purple dogs already. Trouble's color's inverted, which I think is very amusing. Stubbs did whatever this is. Quality did something for sure. Portable turned gray, which is better than turning purple, so I'll take it. Pillow became this really fun green color. Rat became even more rat-like. Yonder's head shrunk, and somehow Yonder became even flatter. Speedy lost the cool body color and got kinda bigger. And to finish off the second round of mutations, Blinky became very orange and citrusy looking. For the third round of mutations, Misha got marginally bigger. Trouble's head shrunk. Stubbs also got a little bigger. Quality became a very nice color of green. Portable was entirely blue now. Pillow was a very bright, big dog. Rat became slightly bigger. Yonder was still a flat dog. Speedy changed to this very fun yellow color, and Blinky was now green. The fourth and final round of mutations started with Misha turning completely purple. Trouble became entirely pink, which is better than becoming entirely purple. Stubbs became a slightly bigger, slightly whiter dog. Quality got ever so slightly bigger. Portable was a bigger, bluer dog. Pillow was now this cool color. Rat became a much bigger dog. Yonder was a very wide, big-winged dog. Speedy became a much brighter color. And to end the fourth round of mutations, Blinky turned completely green. And after collecting eggs, I pulled out 10 of the most plain-looking adult dogs. Those dogs being Sippy, Liminal, Buddy, Frantic, Drip, Bagel, Dog, Spud, Previous, and Pancake. After some time, Drip was the first to pass away, and therefore the unfortunate candidate for what I was about to do next. After I cracked his dog core open, I fed it to Sippy, which extended Sippy's life, and I felt kinda bad for denying Drip an afterlife, but nonetheless, I had earned the achievement I had wanted, and the dogs that were still alive had a feast. I was at 84% completion for the achievements, and even though it wasn't a part of my initial goal, I really wanted to finish all of them. And a while later, as Sippy was having a nap, I earned the Ancient achievement, which you get from having a dog live long enough to become ancient, which unlock these burnt dog biscuits. And I wasn't quite sure what they did, but it was cool nonetheless. I was done with Sippy for the moment though, so I went ahead and stored him away, after which I went into the simulation to make the next generation of dogs. Starting with Trouble and Yonder, who made this very flat pink dog. Blinky and Rat made this tiny dog with many legs and many heads. Speedy and Rat created this long dog with a really cool tail. Pairing Blinky and Pillow produced this huge dog with comically tiny wings. Speedy and Loaf made this dog who I think has 3 sets of wings, but honestly it's a little hard to tell. Bat and Bug made this really quite unremarkable dog. It's a cool dog, I just wasn't all that impressed. Zombie and Bat made a Gnat. I paired Bug and Zombie next, and all I put in my notes was not good. Needless to say, I wasn't impressed. Puppy and Bat made this tiny dog, who honestly just looks like Puppy, but I'm okay with that. And lastly, Snacks and Bug made this very tiny, spindly-legged little freak, and I love him. After they were all cooked up in the incubators, I named them Steven, Mutt, Smush, Previous, Quartz, Pretty, Bread, Tiny, Kiwi, and Torque, taking the egg count to 80. I also earned another achievement for hatching Pretty, jumping into the first round of mutations with Torque becoming slightly bigger, Kiwi turning a different purple color, Tiny stayed very tiny and lost the pink color, Bread also changed to a different color of purple and got slightly bigger, Pretty turned completely green, Quartz got kinda darker in color, Previous got a little bigger, Smush was now a light green color, Mutt was a slightly bigger mutt, and Steven was a fat enough dog to earn me a few new achievements, one of which gave me this new food, and left me at 91%, leaving only 6 achievements to get, which might have been where I really committed to completing all the achievements. I wasn't not trying before, but I also wasn't going out of my way to get them either. And with that new goal in mind, it was time to go into the next round of mutations, starting with Torque getting just a little bigger. Kiwi had a weird color change. Tiny was still tiny, but also green now. Bread was just kinda bigger. Pretty was quite a bit bigger and green. Quartz had a slight color change. Previous also had a color change. Smush stayed almost exactly the same. Mutt stayed mostly the same except for getting quite a lot bigger. And Steven was still a very flat, but now slightly bigger dog. The third round of mutations started with Torque doing almost nothing. Kiwi followed Torque's lead and remained for the most part the same. Tiny also didn't change much, but I really like Tiny, so that's okay. Bread did a whole lot of nothing. Pretty had kind of a cool color change. Quartz got darker in color. Previous changed color and got considerably bigger. Smush somehow lost a pair of legs. Mutt turned kind of yellow. And ending this round of mutations, Steven was still a very flat dog. Overall, probably the least eventful round of mutations in a little while. Also, I put in my notes that Tiny was my favorite dog, which I think makes Tiny my 7th favorite dog. The fourth and final round of mutations started with Torque turning a much better color. Kiwi got a little bit bigger. Tiny was still a tiny dog. Bread's head shrunk a whole lot. Pretty turned purple, which normally I wouldn't be all that impressed with, but in this instance I think it's okay. Quartz grew very large, which was quite the feat for an already very big dog. Previous turned pink, which I also wouldn't be all that impressed by, but the pink and yellow is kinda giving Courage the Cowardly Dog vibes, so once again I think it's okay. Smush also turned pink and got a little bigger. Mutt changed from white to green. And to end the last round of mutations for this generation, Steven was still an extremely flat pink dog. Before jumping into the next generation, I went about reorganizing the rooms once again, after which I had to move stuff around so the dogs could actually access the tunnels. I also set up a new room with this Wobbledog statue in the middle, which I'm going to call my favorite room, because it was my favorite room. After I was done with that, I went about changing all the food dispensers, eventually looping back around to my favorite room, where I placed a bunch of these tiny fake plants. I was very much going for an overgrown ruins type of vibe. I'd also been collecting eggs while I was doing all that, and after having them all collected, I stored this generation. Also, because I was trying to complete all the achievements I had left, I imported Noodle, a one-winged dog who is also a very putrid ramen color. He's also not going on the egg counter because I didn't hatch him. There were also only 5 achievements I needed now, one of which was for hatching a one-winged dog. So I sent Noodle into storage and went into the simulation to make the next generation. Starting with Noodle and Portable, who made this one-winged dog. Olive and Portable combined made this dog with almost no body. Previous paired with Mutt created this tiny square-shaped blue dog. I paired Mud with Baseboard next. Also, you might not recognize Mud, and that's because he's the dog you get for the negative reinforcement achievement. And I think at some point I said I wasn't going to use any of the achievement dogs to get new features, but we're more than halfway done at this point, and I think the probability of me getting patterns on my own are very slim. That being said, they made this absolutely brilliant little dude. Mutt and Mud were the next pairing, which made this very colorful 3-headed dog with a neat pattern. Pretty and Baseboard ended up having this dog with really cool wings, who for sure had a concussion after repeatedly hitting her head on the roof. Blinky paired with Quartz made this very monochrome dog with more than enough wings. Tiny and Snacks created the smallest dog ever with many legs. Tiny and Mutt made a small dog with plenty of long legs. And to finish off the next generation, Previous and Tiny made yet another small dog. I set the next generation to warm up, and after hatching the first one, I got the 1-wing achievement. I named the dogs Helpful, Dog, Peanut, Drip, Sophie, Suitable, Altitude, Bird, Mud, and finally Donut, which means the egg count is now at 90. And because I was trying to get achievements, I sectioned off a corner in one of the rooms that I placed a spooky food dispenser into with gourds selected, so that I could hopefully get the short achievement. And because Helpful had the shortest body of all the dogs in this generation, I opted to have her in there. For a brief second, I thought she might fly out, but then I remembered that she only had 1 wing, so it was probably fine. I did only want her to get mutations from the gourds though, so I temporarily placed a dessert food dispenser in there, so that I could feed her burnt dog biscuits to clear out any gut flora she already had. After which I deleted the dessert food dispenser and left her be. I was excited to see how the first round of mutations would go, and was not disappointed when Helpful got notably shorter. And that seemed to do the trick, and I was rewarded with corn dogs. And Helpful was rewarded by being released from her gourd prison. Dog became quite a lot bigger. Peanut was a slightly different color of blue. Drip was bigger. Sophie became this really nice lavender color. Suitable became green. Altitude didn't really do much of anything. Bird was a slightly different color. Mud did something, and Donut got quite a lot bigger. The second round of mutations started with Helpful getting ever so slightly larger. Dog didn't really do anything interesting. Peanut got a whole lot smaller. Drip got a whole lot bigger. Sophie turned to green. Suitable got a little bigger. Altitude also got a little bigger. Bird did something. Mud also did something. And Donut did what just about everyone else did and got just a little bigger. Also, because I was trying to unlock all the achievements, I had the dogs digging for capsules, during which Suitable dug in this room and found some forbidden cotton candy, otherwise known as insulation, which she ate, unlocking one of the few gut flora I still needed. I actually didn't know that it was possible for some foods to come from certain floors. I mean, I knew the snow floor would give me snowballs, but it didn't really cross my mind that other floors would do the same. And so I used the sand room to test out the other floors I had unlocked, to see if I could find any new foods that way. And I didn't think I was getting anywhere with that, and I technically didn't, but I changed the floor to this lab tile, which earned me the Out of This World achievement, which wasn't the achievement I was going for, but I'll take it. The dogs were also ready for a third round of mutations at this point, so I went ahead and sent them all up. This round of mutations started with Helpful turning yellow. Dog's head shrunk a large amount and was now proportional to his body. Peanut was still a tiny but now brighter dog. Drip was also brighter in color. Sophie didn't really do anything. Suitable turned this barfy color. Altitude was still basically the same dog. Bird was now this very cool red color. Mud was now a very long dog. And Donut didn't really do anything remarkable. I had Drip dig this flooring, which unearthed a fish pellet, leaving only 3 more floras to discover, which I might have looked up. Only because I didn't think I was going to find them through natural means. The 3 I was missing were old dog flora, which I assume I get from an old dog, cactus fruit, which I need to find the prickly pear plant decoration to get, and sample cups, which I need to find the sample table decoration to get. In the meantime, though, I changed the floor to this purple carpet and sent all the dogs up for their last round of mutations. Starting with Helpful, who was just a very big, short-bodied dog. Dog was a different color of orange now. Peanut was just kinda bigger. Drip had brighter spots. Sophie was a touch bigger. Suitable was completely yellow now. Altitude was brighter overall. Bird grew quite a lot. Mud got bigger. And to end the last round of mutations, Donut's head got way smaller. After collecting a few eggs, I put Helpful away so that I could pull Sippy back out. Because, unfortunately for Sippy, I needed him to die, so that I could unlock one of the 3 gut floras I still need. After I had the eggs collected, I put everyone but Sippy away and went into the simulation. I paired Mutt and Drip together first, which gave me this very cool dog. Sophie and Mud were next, making this dog with a very cool pattern. I paired Yonder and Sophie next, which made this very neat blue dog. Pillow and Suitable made this dog with almost no head. And lastly, Pillow and Worm made this purple and green dog. I put those 5 eggs into the incubators before picking 4 of my previous dogs to bring back out. That way there were 5 puppies and 5 adult dogs. After which I hatched the new dogs, naming them Noodle, Buddy, Spike, Gremlin, and Pretty, taking the egg count to a solid 95. Bread passed away before I started the first round of mutations, so I waited for the puppies to have their fill before sending them up. Starting with Noodle, who turned almost entirely purple. Buddy did a whole lot of nothing. Spike turned purple. Gremlin was bigger and a brighter green, and Pretty got bigger. All the adult dogs passed away before the second round of mutations, including Sippy, who I was sad to see die, but now I have another new gut flora. The second round of mutations started with Noodle having a complete color palette change. Buddy got quite a lot bigger. Spike didn't do much. Gremlin got bigger and bluer, and Pretty did as close to nothing as she could. Also, I learned that ancient flora gives desaturated colors. It also leaves just 2 more gut floras to learn before I've 100%ed the game. Also, and completely unrelated to anything else, I stored all my dirt in this storage chest before bringing it all back out, which was wonderful. With only 5 dogs out, I decided to head into the simulation to make more dogs, starting with Zombie and Bradley, who made this dog with a rather magnificent tail. I paired Tiny and Mutt next, making this dog with really funky antenna. Zombie and Portable combined to make this dog, which I really quite like. Mud and Zombie paired together made this nub-horned dog. And finally, Drip and First made this very long dog. And after baking them all in the incubators, I named them Mustard, Duster, Bird, Wolf, and Ham, bringing my dog count back up to an even 10 and the egg count to 100. However, I think I proceeded to hatch like 20 more eggs after this, so while Ham might be the 100th dog, we continue forward, because I can't count apparently. When the time came for the next round of mutations, I only sent up my first 5, which started with Noodle having a pretty dramatic color change. Buddy went from ugly to hideously ugly. Spike got this fun yellow color. Gremlin lost one of their heads. And to finish the 3rd round of mutations, Pretty got ever so slightly bigger. We're gonna jump straight into the 4th round of mutations. Noodle became this really neat golden color. Buddy got bigger. Spike now had small spots. Gremlin had a bit of a color change, and Pretty didn't really do anything. With those 5 done, I hopped back into the simulation, where I paired Rat and Noodle first, which gave me this dog with really cool stripes. Spike and Bird were next, ending with this dog who had funny little dot eyes. Pretty paired with Spike created this fun cotton candy dog. Noodle and Mutt made this big 3-headed dog. And finally, Gremlin paired with Pretty made this tiny dog with even tinier wings. I was, however, waiting for the current adult generation to pass away, so hatching them was going to have to wait. It really didn't take too long before the first dog passed away, that being Spike, who was then eaten by the puppies, who now had a plethora of gut flora floating around. But I wasn't quite ready to mutate them just yet. There were still 4 more dogs to eat after all. Also, at some point, Duster dug up this capsule, which gave me the sample table, which gave me the new sample cup food, which unlocked another gut flora, leaving only 1 left to discover. After the last dog passed away and the puppies had their fill, I sent them up for their first mutations. Starting with Mustard, who did remarkably little. Dustard also did little to nothing. Bird had a stunning amount of nothing going on. Wolf turned blue, I guess. And finally, to end the first round of mutations, Ham was more ham-like. I wasn't all that impressed with the first round of mutations, but maybe the second would be better. Mustard was now more like her namesake. Duster had some cool bright antenna things. Bird still wasn't participating. Wolf picked a different color of blue to be, and Ham did something, I suppose. The third round of mutations started with Mustard getting bigger. Duster did next to nothing. Bird got shorter. Wolf had kind of a cool color change, and Ham was even more ham-like. Jumping straight into the last round of mutations, Mustard was no longer a fun mustard color. Duster did as little as possible. Bird actually looked pretty cool. Not cool enough to become one of my favorites, but cool nonetheless. Wolf was still blue, and Ham was now all pink, making the perfect ham dog. I am actually quite glad I suck at counting and that I didn't end here, because between you and me, that would have been a really lackluster generation to end on. Instead, we're jumping back into the simulation to make what I thought was the last generation of dogs. I also completely forgot about the 5 waiting for me in the incubators, but whatever. We're pairing Ham and Duster together, which made this long dog with 2 heads. Mustard and Bird created this cool-looking green and yellow dog. Drip and Bird combined to create this fun striped dude. Duster paired with Bird ended in this many-legged tiny individual. Steven and Ham made this big flat dog with a fun heart pattern. Mutt and Suitable created this very slim dog with a big tail and wings. Peanut paired with Previous produced a very big yellow dog. Pretty and Bird made this tiny dog with very neat eyes and cool little mouse ears. Rat and Mutt made this tiny purple and blue dog. And finally, Speedy and Mouse made this very ordinary blue fella. I incubated and hatched the next generation, naming them Tremendous, Candy, Crouton, Snacks, Spider, Snacks, Olive, Hollow, Lump, and Noodle, making the total egg count 110. The first round of mutations started with Noodle, who had a slight color change, which I think matched his green complexion more. Lump somehow became more pink. Hollow became bigger, but somehow not whiter. Olive kinda just looked gross, to be honest. Snacks shrunk. Spider got slightly bigger. Snacks, and yes, I accidentally named 2 of them Snacks. Doesn't matter. Either way, he didn't do much. Crouton had a bit of a color shift. Candy was now this really cool red dog, and Tremendous was an ever so slightly longer dog. The second round of mutations started with Noodle turning more yellow. Lump became this funky salmon pink color. Hollow once again grew bigger without also becoming whiter. Olive was now orange. Snacks became this really cool shade of purple gray. Spider got absolutely annihilated when coming out of his cocoon, and he deserved it because he didn't really do anything. Snacks was looking very bug-like. Crouton was now very green. Candy became very muted in color and was looking real neat. And Tremendous ended the second round of mutations doing little to nothing. For the third round of mutations, Noodle stayed basically the same. Lump did this really neat color change, which I like quite a lot more than all the pink. Hollow got smaller. Olive turned this yellow color. Snacks was looking a lot like a mouse. Spider was just a very big dog. Snacks grew a second set of front legs. Crouton didn't really do a whole lot, but I still think he's cool. Tremendous got smaller and almost blended in with the blue background. And Candy was still cool. I started the last round of mutations backwards. So starting with Candy, who didn't really do a whole lot. She was just kind of bigger. Tremendous had a pretty neat color combination going on. Crouton was almost entirely this nuclear green color. Snacks was more yellow all around and also lost a set of back legs. Spider was big and ugly. Snacks was just a little bigger. Olive looked a whole lot like vomit to me. Hollow got smaller all around, but her head definitely saw the majority of the shrinkage. Lump was a really cool green color. And finally, Noodle got quite a lot longer, but other than that, he didn't do anything. And that was the second to last generation of dogs mutated. I was still on the hunt for the last food I needed, so while I waited for them to lay eggs, I had them dig as many holes as possible. And finally, after what felt like, and really was, forever, this capsule had the prickly pear in it, which I was able to place down and pick the fruit from, which earned me the second to last achievement and an additional pen, which was great timing because I was getting ready to redo the rooms for the last 10 dogs. I started the renovations with reordering where all the rooms sit, after which I reconnected everything and went about redecorating and offering new food options. The first room was this very bright rainbow room. I didn't change anything about my favorite room because look how cool it is. I changed the snow room to this unthemed room. I was honestly just throwing all the cool stuff I had collected down. I redid my least favorite room into this kinda but not really space-themed room. My spooky graveyard room turned into this jungle graveyard room. I did almost nothing to my neat skeleton room. The weird purple space room got changed into the new snow room. I cleared out the arcade-looking room, which included clearing out foliage, and changing the wall. I pretty much left the starting room alone other than cleaning it up and moving some things. The alien room was cool, but very much so an eyesore, so I changed it into this funky-looking ice room, and that was the last of the rooms, which means it's time for the last generation of dogs. So jumping into the simulation, I started with Hollow and Lump, who made this dog with cool colors. Crouton and Tremendous made this dude, and I really like this little guy. We'll put him down as what I think is my 8th favorite dog. I paired Crouton and Noodle next, making this 4-headed dog, which I could be wrong, but I don't think I've had a 4-headed dog yet, so that's neat. Snacks and Mutt made this big dog with all the legs. And finally, Duster and Ham made this 3-headed rectangular individual. I set the last 10 dogs into Cook before naming them, and I did actually choose all their names this time. Their names were Blue, Duck, Yellow, Ugly, Chip, Bean, Piebald, Last, even though I didn't name him last, and finally Mint and Stripe. I said I named them, I didn't say they were very good names. Also, the egg count is now at 120, so jumping straight into the first round of mutations, Stripe started us out by being boring. Mint reminded me so much of Mint ice cream, she earned a place in my favorite dog list. Piebald became a much neater green color. Bean was still very much the same. Chip looked a ton weirder than what he already did. Ugly barely grew and otherwise stayed the same. Yellow grew quite a bit bigger and was almost entirely the same shade of yellow. Duck changed very little. Blue also changed very little. And Last was now more red than magenta. I thought this round of mutations would complete the achievements for me, but there was still one effect I was missing. I also realized I hadn't laid down all the toys after redoing all the rooms. So before getting into the second round of mutations, I went through and did that, after which it was hopefully time to get my last achievement. Starting with Stripe, who now lived up to his name by having a singular stripe. Mint did something drastic and was just the coolest dog ever. Piebald was now orange and looked very funky. Bean was MVP and earned me my last achievement. He also turned green. Chip was bigger. Ugly was now blue, and maybe a little less ugly. Yellow was now partially green now. Duck was still a funny little dog. Blue was still blue. And Last had a huge curly tail. Before starting the third round of mutations, I peeked to see what the last effect I had been missing was, and I also collected my last achievement reward, which was this golden dog named Superior. I didn't plan on doing anything with him, but that 100% was a very neat number. It's almost as neat as the blue ribbon I now have on this game. Jumping into the third round of mutations, Stripe was now purple. Mint became a much taller rectangle, and her spots were now black. Piebald was also now a really cool color, and just for the sake of it, she's going on the favorite dog list. Chip was shaping up to be a long, spindly dog. Ugly was, once again, ugly. Yellow was still a big dog with comedically small wings. Duck's snout became less downturned. Blue was still blue. Bean changed color, and Last was now a lot bigger. Jumping straight into the last round of mutations, both for these dogs and this video, we start with Stripe becoming this neat shade of purple, Mint being my favorite dog of this batch. Piebald didn't do a whole lot to end us off, but that's okay. Chip was even more spindly now. Ugly did something really weird with his legs, and I just really didn't like it. Yellow was a Goliath of a dog. Duck became very short. Blue was actually a little green now. Bean was also green. And Last ended us off by becoming a big, brilliant dog. The first round of dogs compared to the last is a brilliant example of how goofy this game is. I love it. That was the last round of dogs though. So that'll be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did enjoy watching, maybe consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.